The night had fallen quiet over the small town of Maple Hollow. The neon sign of Coleman Industries flickered against the mist, and Ethan Coleman, one of the richest men in the state, was about to step into his black SUV when a small voice broke through the cold air. "Don't start the car." He turned. A little girl stood near the curb, trembling in her worn coat, her eyes wide with urgency. "I heard them," she whispered. "Your guards. They said your car will explode." For a moment the world went still. The guards shifted, pretending not to notice, while Ethan's mind raced. Was this madness, or a warning from something far greater than reason? The girl's tiny hand gripped his sleeve. "Please," she said, "don't get in." That single choice, whether to trust a child or his own men, would change everything. Because sometimes the truth doesn't come from power, but from innocence. Before the story begins, if you believe that fate speaks through unexpected voices, if you know that even a whisper can save a life, then don't forget to subscribe to Golden Tales, where every story reminds us that destiny often hides behind the simplest acts of courage. The sun was sinking low over Maple Creek, a quiet town that looked like it had been frozen in time somewhere between innocence and decay. The air carried that soft golden haze that makes everything feel like a memory. At the edge of town, a convoy of black SUVs rolled past the local diner and parked in front of the Riverside Inn, the only place with glass walls tall enough to reflect the dying light. Inside one of those cars sat Ethan Coleman, a man whose name alone could move markets. To the locals, he was a stranger. To the rest of the world, he was a legend. A billionaire with steel-gray eyes and a reputation for never hesitating. Ethan had come to Maple Creek for one reason only: to finalize a land acquisition deal worth hundreds of millions. For him, it was supposed to be another clean transaction by build, profit, move on. But fate had a different kind of business waiting for him that evening. When he stepped out of the SUV, the air felt unusually still. His security team spread out, scanning the area like they always did. For men, each dressed in identical black suits, each armed and trained to sense danger before it struck. They looked calm, professional, maybe too calm. Ethan checked his watch, irritation crossing his face. "Let's make this quick," he muttered. His voice was deep, tired, the voice of a man who'd seen too many people bow to him. As he approached the glass doors of the inn, a small voice stopped him. "Sir." He turned around sharply. Standing a few feet away was a little girl, maybe 7 years old, holding a small paper bag of groceries in her arms. Her hair was the color of chestnuts, tangled by the wind, and her dress was faded but clean. She looked up at him with a mix of fear and determination that made Ethan pause without knowing why. I heard them talking," she said quietly. "You shouldn't get in that car." Ethan frowned. "What did you say?" The girl swallowed hard. Her hands trembled, but her voice didn't. "They said your car will explode." For a moment, the only sound was the rustle of the trees nearby. The guards exchanged glances. Ethan almost laughed. It was too absurd to believe. But something in the girl's eyes, that strange, unwavering sincerity, kept him silent. "Sweetheart, who told you that?" he asked gently, bending a little to meet her gaze. She pointed toward the black SUVs. "Those men, the ones who came with you." Ethan's expression darkened. "You mean my security detail?" The girl nodded. "They were behind the building. I was passing by with my grandma's groceries, and they were talking in another language. I think it was Chinese." Ethan's chest tightened. He wasn't sure what startled him more, the accusation or the detail. Few people knew that some of his security personnel had come from an international firm. Fewer still could identify their language. "You understood what they said?" he asked carefully. "My grandma taught me some the girl said softly. She used to live in Chinatown before we moved here. I know enough to understand when someone says a car will blow up. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her this time. Her eyes were wide and honest, filled not with fear, but with the quiet urgency of someone who just wanted to help. Behind him, one of the guards stepped forward. Mr. Coleman, we should get inside. We're drawing attention. Ethan raised a hand, signaling him to stop. Then he crouched slightly closer to the girl. What's your name? Lily, she whispered. Well, Lily, he said slowly. That's a serious thing to say. Are you sure about what you heard? She nodded, clutching the paper bag to her chest. They said they'll wait for the sound, then everything will be chaos, and no one will know it was them. Ethan's instincts, the same instincts that had saved him in boardrooms full of sharks, began to stir. He turned his head slightly, glancing at the guards from the corner of his eye. They looked normal, too normal, but something inside him whispered, don't dismiss it. He took a slow breath. Lily, can you keep this between us for now? Her eyes darted nervously to the men standing by the cars. They'll know I told you. Not if we're smart, Ethan said, lowering his voice. Listen carefully. I want you to stay close to the diner, okay? If anything happens, you run inside and don't look back. Lily's lips quivered. Are you going to get in the car? He looked at her tiny figure trembling in the wind, and something human flickered inside him that had been buried under years of wealth and walls. No, he said finally. Not yet. He turned toward one of his assistants, a young man named Mark Davis, the only person Ethan had known long enough to trust. Mark, he said in a firm whisper. Bring Jake here, quietly, no one else. Mark nodded and disappeared around the side of the building. Jake Turner was the head of Ethan's personal security team and the only one who hadn't joined them from the international firm. Ethan could feel eyes on him. He didn't dare turn around. The men near the SUVs were pretending to be relaxed, chatting casually, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. When Jake arrived, Ethan leaned closer. Do a full sweep on the car. Say it's a routine check. No questions. Jake frowned, reading his boss's tone. What's going on? Just do it, Ethan said quietly. Jake nodded, walking toward the first SUV. The others stiffened, exchanging glances. One of them, a tall man named Lee, forced a smile. Everything all right, sir? We were about to roll out. Ethan didn't answer. He was watching Lily from the corner of his eye. The little girl stood by the lamppost, biting her lip, watching Jake inspect the car with careful precision. The seconds stretched. The wind picked up, rattling the leaves against the pavement. Somewhere a dog barked. Then, from near the hood, Jake froze. His hand moved slowly, deliberately. He looked back at Ethan, his face pale. Ethan felt his stomach drop. Sir, Jake called out, voice tight. You might want to step back. The moment hung in the air like a thread about to snap. The guards' faces changed, subtle but visible. One of them reached for his earpiece. Another shifted his stance. And that was all Ethan needed to know. He turned his gaze toward Lily, who whispered, They know. Ethan exhaled slowly, the weight of reality sinking in. The girl had been right, and the next few seconds would decide whether he lived or died. The next morning, the entire town seemed to breathe under a golden mist. The sunlight spilled through the trees like melted honey, and the sound of birds echoed across the narrow streets of Maplewood. Inside the diner, Emma stood by the counter, her apron still damp from wiping tables. Her eyes were heavy, not from lack of sleep, but from the thoughts that had haunted her all night. She kept seeing the image of the woman and her baby in the alleyway. At one point during the night, She had almost convinced herself to go back and bring them food. But then fear spoke louder, the fear of getting involved, the fear of looking foolish, the fear of being judged. Now, as the sun rose, she couldn't shake the guilt pressing down on her chest. "Morning, sweetheart," said Mrs. Kent, the old baker who owned the place. Her voice cracked like dry wood, but her eyes were kind. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Emma forced a small smile. "Just didn't sleep much." Mrs. Kent tilted her head. "Thinking about something? Or someone?" Emma hesitated. Then she nodded. "There's this woman I saw last night. She was sleeping outside. With a baby." The old woman frowned deeply. "Oh dear. Out by the hardware store." Emma nodded again. Mrs. Kent sighed. "That must be Samantha. Poor girl. She used to work at the grocery before her husband got into that accident. Everything went downhill after that. She tried to keep things together, but..." She paused, shaking her head. "This town can be kind, but sometimes kindness fades too quickly." Emma's heart twisted. "So everyone knows her?" "Most do," Mrs. Kent replied, placing a pie in the oven. "But folks don't like to see what hurts them. They look away and tell themselves it's not their problem." Emma's throat tightened. She remembered how she had looked away, too. The bell above the door jingled. Mr. Collins walked in, his heavy boots thudding against the floor, his tie already loose, as if it was strangling him. "Coffee," he barked. "And make it strong." Mrs. Kent rolled her eyes. "You and your coffee," she muttered, sliding the cup across. He ignored the comment and sat by the window. His eyes fell on Emma. "You look pale, girl. Don't tell me you're getting soft on the job already." Emma froze. She wasn't used to being addressed like that, but she'd learned not to argue. Mrs. Kent gave him a sharp look. "Don't mind him," she said softly to Emma. "Some men mistake authority for character." Emma forced a nod, but inside she was burning. Not with anger, but with something else. The spark of a realization. That man, sitting there with his arrogance and cold heart. He probably walked past Samantha too. Everyone did. And maybe she thought that's how cruelty survives, not through monsters but through indifference. That evening, when the diner closed, Emma walked home with a brown paper bag of leftover rolls. The sky was bleeding shades of violet and gold, and the world felt eerily quiet. She didn't mean to walk toward the alley again, or maybe she did. Her heart guided her steps before her mind could stop them. When she turned the corner, she froze. The woman and her baby were still there. The woman sat upright this time, humming softly, rocking her child in her arms. Her hair was tangled, her coat thin against the cold. When she looked up and saw Emma, her expression shifted from caution to hope, and then to shame. "I'm sorry," Emma blurted. I should have said something last night." The woman shook her head gently. "You don't owe me anything." Emma stepped closer. "I brought you something to eat." She held out the paper bag. The woman hesitated, then accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You didn't have to." Emma sat down beside her on the concrete. "What's your name?" "Samantha," she replied softly. "And this is Lily." She looked down at the baby, whose tiny hand clutched her sleeve. "She's 5 months old." Emma smiled faintly. "She's beautiful." Samantha nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I keep telling her things will get better, that someday she'll have her own room, her own bed, maybe even a little garden." For a moment, the two women sat in silence, the night air filled with the distant hum of cars and the soft cooing of the baby. Then Emma said quietly, "You shouldn't be out here." "I know," Samantha replied, her voice breaking, "but the shelter's full, and my last paycheck barely covered diapers. I've been looking for work, but people see me like this and..." She trailed off. Emma looked away, her jaw tightening. The injustice of it all stung. How easily people discarded someone who'd fallen on hard times. Finally, she stood up. "Wait here," she said, her voice steady. "I'll be right back." Samantha blinked, startled. "Where are you going?" "Just wait." Emma ran home, her heart pounding. Her tiny apartment above the laundromat was barely big enough for one person, but she didn't care. She grabbed an old blanket, a spare pillow, and a small teddy bear she'd kept since childhood. A little comfort she never managed to throw away. When she returned to the alley, Samantha was still there, feeding her baby the last of the bread rolls. "I want you to come with me," Emma said firmly. Samantha's eyes widened. "What?" "My apartment's small," Emma said quickly, "but it's warm and safe. You and Lily can stay there tonight." Samantha shook her head immediately. "I can't do that to you." "You're not doing anything to me," Emma insisted. "Please, just for one night." The woman hesitated. "What if someone finds out? You could get in trouble with your landlord." Emma smiled sadly. "Then I'll tell them I couldn't sleep knowing a baby was out in the cold." For a long moment, Samantha just looked at her, as if weighing whether to trust the stranger who had once walked past her. Then finally she nodded. "Okay." That night, Emma laid out the blanket on her couch and watched as Samantha carefully rocked her baby to sleep. Lily's tiny breaths filled the silence, and the room felt softer, almost sacred. "I don't know how to thank you," Samantha whispered. "You don't have to," Emma replied. "Just rest." But sleep didn't come easily for either of them. As Emma lay in bed, she thought about how one small decision, to stop, to care, to act, could change a life. Maybe two, maybe even more. In the morning, when the first light slipped through the curtains, Emma got up early to make coffee. Samantha was still asleep, curled protectively around her baby. For the first time, Emma saw her clearly, not as a stranger in need, but as a woman who had once had dreams, laughter, a home. And something inside Emma shifted. Later that day, she arrived at the diner, still thinking about Samantha. Mrs. Kent noticed immediately. "You did something last night, didn't you?" the old woman asked, wiping flour off her hands. Emma smiled faintly. "I brought her home." Mrs. Kent stopped mid-motion. "You did what?" "She needed help," Emma said simply, "and I couldn't walk away again." The baker's face softened. "You've got a good heart, child. But this town isn't kind to those who stick their necks out." "I don't care," Emma said. "Someone has to start." Just then, Mr. Collins entered again, as punctual as the ticking clock on the wall. But today his arrogance was sharper. He slammed a folder onto the counter. "We've got a problem," he snapped. "The city's sending an inspector next week. If we don't pass, the construction project gets delayed, and that means layoffs." Emma's stomach turned. Her father worked at that site. Mr. Collins looked at her and smirked. "Tell your old man to keep his crew in line. I won't tolerate mistakes." Emma clenched her fists. "You talk about people like they're disposable." His smirk faded. "Watch your tone, young lady. You might lose that job of yours." Mrs. Kent stepped in. "That's enough, Collins. This is a diner, not your kingdom." He sneered, threw a few bills on the counter, and stormed out. When the door closed, Mrs. Kent muttered, "Men like him forget that life can humble anyone." Emma nodded quietly. Sometimes it just takes time. That afternoon, after her shift, Emma went home with determination in her heart. She found Samantha sitting on the floor, gently rocking Lily. "I was thinking," Emma began. "There's an empty room at the diner, old storage space. I could talk to Mrs. Kent about cleaning it up. Maybe you could help in the kitchen until you find a place of your own." Samantha blinked. "You'd do that?" "Of course," Emma said. "Everyone deserves a second chance." Tears filled Samantha's eyes. "You don't even know me." Emma smiled softly. "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to need someone to believe in you." The woman reached for her hand, and for the first time, hope flickered in her tired eyes. But not everyone in town shared that kindness. Word spread quickly that Emma had taken in the homeless woman. Some whispered at the market. Others stared when she walked by. At the grocery store, One of the cashiers muttered under her breath, "Guess she's trying to play the saint now." Emma pretended not to hear, but Samantha did. That night, as Emma washed dishes, Samantha approached her quietly. "Maybe I should go," she said. "People are talking." Emma turned, shocked. "So what? Let them talk." "You don't understand," Samantha whispered. "They'll start judging you too. And you've been nothing but kind." Emma set the dish down and met her eyes. If people's opinions can destroy kindness, then kindness was never real to begin with. Samantha's lips trembled. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. A few days later, Mrs. Kent agreed to let Samantha work part-time at the diner. She started small, cleaning tables, refilling coffee cups, but her gentle smile began to melt even the coldest hearts. Regular customers who had once ignored her started leaving extra tips. And little by little, Maplewood began to change. Even Mr. Collins noticed. One afternoon, as he waited for his coffee, he watched Samantha carrying plates with her baby in a sling. Something about that image, strength wrapped in tenderness, unsettled him. He didn't say a word, but his usual arrogance seemed to soften for a moment. Weeks passed. The leaves began to turn amber and red. Samantha and Lily moved from the couch to the diner's spare room. Emma helped her paint the walls pale yellow. "For sunlight," she said. "It wasn't much, but it was a start." Then, one evening, a storm rolled in, fierce and sudden. The wind howled through the streets, rattling windows. Emma was closing up when Mr. Collins burst through the door, drenched and pale. "Emma," he said breathlessly, "the old bridge, it's collapsing. Your father's crew is trapped on the other side." Her heart stopped. "What?" "They were finishing repairs when the storm hit," he said, grabbing his jacket. "I'm heading there now." Without thinking, Emma ran after him. When they reached the bridge, the rain was coming down in sheets. The wooden planks groaned under the weight of the water. Emma's father stood at the edge, shouting orders, trying to secure the ropes. "Dad!" she screamed. He turned, relief flashing across his face. "Emma, stay back." But then, a loud crack echoed through the air. One of the beams gave way. Mr. Collins lunged forward, helping pull the men to safety. For the first time, his suit and pride didn't matter. Only the people did. By the time the storm eased, everyone was soaked, trembling, but alive. Emma looked at Collins, barely recognizing him. He met her eyes and nodded silently. A truce. Days later, the town gathered for the rebuilding effort. Samantha brought food from the diner, and Emma's father worked side by side with the same man who once threatened his job. The town that had looked away began to look closer. Mrs. Kent whispered to Emma, "Sometimes it takes one act of compassion to remind a town what it means to be human." Emma smiled faintly. "And sometimes, it takes losing everything to learn what really matters." Samantha looked around. At the people helping, the laughter, the baby gurgling in her arms, and whispered, "Maybe we were all homeless in some way, until we found each other." The sun broke through the clouds then, bathing the muddy ground in light. And for a moment, Maplewood, that small, forgotten town, felt like a place where miracles could still happen.